Any other questions? Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Number 3, discuss action to confirm the chairman's nomination of Joy Pelfrey to the position of fire chief. Joy, would you and the fire chief mind coming to the lectern? On this particular item, I always like to have the input of the fire chief to say, who's your nominee? And I knew the answer to that before I asked him, but I want to give him that courtesy. So,
Gary coming up there for it.
come on. Your head's already big enough, you know. Chief, you recommended Fire Chief Pelfrey, so can you give me a couple reasons why?
Yes, sir, I sure can. Deputy Chief Joey Pelfrey has been with us for right at 20 years, from volunteer on up. He came up through our ranks as an officer, a firefighter, officer, a battalion chief, made him deputy chief, I think 11 years ago. And he's been, he's my right-hand man all along. He's been in charge of operations. He knows everything inside and outside this fire department as I have designed it. And planned. He's been there, he's part of it. He knows exactly what we need to do, where we need to go for the next 10 years. And I trust him with the department. To
Chief
carry it
Pelfrey,
into the future.
thank you. Chief Pelfrey, if tonight you're voted in, you willing to accept this position? And
Yes, sir, I am. I've been honored to be the next fire chief. First of all, I was going to vote for Sheriff Jones. He told me I was going to wash trucks, wax trucks, and mop and sweep floors, so I didn't think that was so wise. Sorry about that. But yes, sir, like Chief said, I've started volunteering. I've been here 22 years. I've worked with some of the greatest people and departments, and it would be an honor to be the next fire chief.
I've also asked him to serve in the same capacity as our fire chief. If y'all know, Chief Earwood was also our emergency manager for the county. So he filled 2 important roles. And we weren't without catastrophes, were we? To talk about the 500-year floods and the tornado and then the couple of ice storms. So y'all managed your way through that greatly. We appreciate you. Look forward to your confirmation, and I just want to say thank you both. You got anything else you want to add?
Well, thank you, Mr. Jones, also for all his support.
You got it. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 4, discuss action to adopt resolution 14-29 requesting the Federal Aviation Administration to add Baldwin County Airport Authority as a sponsor for the Airport Improvement Program grants for Baldwin County Northwest Atlanta Airport. Is Blake in the room? I'll ask Jason Phillips and Blake both to make comments on this item.
Start right here. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think, sure. This is really just a housekeeping item. I'd like to start off by explaining how our airport functions with the FAA, because I think that's important background information. Up until about 5 years ago, we operated and coordinated directly with the Federal Aviation Administration, the way most other airports do, most other states do. However, about 5, maybe 6 years ago, Georgia became what they call a block grant state. And in a nutshell, what that means, and I didn't plan it this way, but it just worked out well. The presentation that you just saw from the folks with Brown and Caldwell, what they will be doing for the county, if you approve their contract this evening, is exactly what Georgia DOT does for the FAA in the state of Georgia. So the FAA, I don't coordinate typically directly with the FAA. Our grants don't come directly from the FAA. Everything runs through Georgia Department of Transportation. So when I have a question, I pick up the phone and I call Georgia DOT Aviation Division, When there's a grant that comes, as you saw 2 weeks ago, it wasn't from the FAA, it's from Georgia DOT. So that is how we function in the state of Georgia in terms of aviation projects. The money ultimately comes from the federal government and it ultimately comes from the FAA, but it's handed to Georgia DOT, and Georgia DOT is the program and project manager. So they utilize, of course, directives and regulations from the FAA to determine how those are used, what way they're used, what restrictions are placed upon them, and all that kind of stuff. But our coordination is through the Georgia Department of Transportation. As such, we were recognized by Georgia DOT as being co-sponsors quite a while back. That conversation took place probably 3, maybe 4 months ago. The state DOT did send us a grant in the name of both sponsors, the Fulton County Board of Commissioners and the Airport Authority. However, there has become a question as to whether or not there should have been a resolution done. There is a difference of opinion as to whether or not there should have been a resolution or shouldn't have been a resolution. So out of an extreme abundance of caution, we have brought a resolution to you to make sure that we don't have any issues moving forward. So that is a brief summary, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Any questions?
Yeah. But I'll let Jason go ahead. Look like you want to say.
Yeah, just briefly, the resolution is fairly short. It really has 2 components to it. One is a formal request to FAA to add the Airport Authority as an additional sponsor. The second component is, in the event that that happens, this resolution will reaffirm and ratify the IGA that was approved at the last meeting.
Okay, questions? You probably just explained it, but this came up on May 27th, and I asked several times about sponsorship, the contracts coming back to us, the environmental assessments, and so here we are today. Tell me what's making us do this? Were we really not? Was not everybody the sponsor as far as the Airport Authority and us? Are we repairing something? Are we just making sure everything's correct?
We are, as I stated, acting out of an extreme abundance of caution. We're in a block grant state, so we work under the direction of Georgia DOT. Georgia DOT has indicated to me that we are co-sponsors. However, there are an army of attorneys looking at every single thing that we do, from every contract to the intergovernmental agreement to every check that we write, everything. So,
Come on.
and we still don't know who's paying for that. So out of an extreme abundance of caution, we brought this resolution to you. I don't know that it's needed. However, I would rather be safe than sorry, and that's why it's here today.
But in essence, I mean, we were asked by the FAA, I know in talking with Jason, the language, there's some question about the, what am I trying to say? In other words, where it references who is a sponsor and who isn't. It doesn't, in their law, Jason interprets it that it can be the Airport Authority or the county either way. The FAA just plainly said, we want a resolution. And again, it's in, it is to make the grant or the environmental assessment for them to issue the money. The state gave us the grant in both names, which originally in May, the state actually was a direct FAA grant. Then it got changed back that the state wrote the grant. What we voted on last time came from the state, at least in both parties, and this is to, for lack of a better word, satisfy the FAA that officially the Airport Authority needs to be requested as a co-sponsor, even though it's been acting like one.
That's correct. And as I said, we may actually may actually need it or we may not. However, we don't need to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months down the road and find out that we did need it. So this is something that I think just simply clears up any questions. That's all there's to it.
And let me add, Commissioner Graham and Commissioner Pownell, one of the reasons in drafting the resolution, it's a short one-pager, just to make it simple, not to add any highfalutin legalese all over the place. It's just to address really one issue, and that is to add, request the FAA to add the airport authority as an additional sponsor. When you look at the FAA assurances, they've got various types of components in there about who can be a sponsor, whether it's a public sponsor or a private sponsor, whether the sponsor, a public agency, or the federal government owns the real property upon which the airport is located. We believe that this will just resolve one potential issue going forward, so that, as Mr. Schwabert said, we're going to come back to you later to readdress something that we perhaps missed.
I guess another question, and I apologize for taking the time to ask so many questions. As I said before, I've been criticized for not asking questions. In the intergovernmental agreement that this board passed 3-2 weeks ago today, I think I asked the question, I think Tommy asked the questions about maybe the FAA having an approval for that. In other words, they gave you a verbal okay, is what you stated.
Yes, actually what the
For that.
FAA told me was that document, that they didn't need to review that document. They did, they looked at it, and said that that's a document between two local entities. That's not necessarily of consequence to them. However, they would, as was mentioned earlier, they would prefer to see this resolution because they feel that it solidifies the position of the two governmental agencies, Palm County Board of Commissioners and Palm County Airport.
And I know that, we're not discussing the intergovernmental agreement, but this is tied to that because of what was done 2 weeks ago. Am I correct? That's just
I don't necessarily think so.
making sure the sponsorship's correct so we can, okay. Well, have we received anything? Has the Board of Commissioners, the Airport Authority, or anybody received anything from the FAA in writing concerning this that we're doing today?
Yes, sir.
No, no.
And so you are aware, I did forward a copy of this resolution to FAA.
Okay.
Not received anything in response to it.
But we haven't received anything from, have we received anything from the FAA since our 2 week ago meeting today? Has anybody received anything? The Board of Commissioners, Airport Authority, or yourself, have we had anything come in since 2 weeks ago that's concerning the intergovernmental agreement, but also would maybe have anything to do in writing with this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that did happen is we did go down and have a meeting with the FAA. And what we wanted was a clearance. They sent out a letter, and the letter was sent out, actually handed to me while I was sitting in the meeting with them. And we were discussing whether a resolution needed to take place or not. We had advice from Georgia DOT that we didn't. However, the person was in the hospital and couldn't be at the meeting, and we felt like after we were in that meeting that we would move forward, bring a resolution today to confirm what we discussed in that meeting.
Okay, so we had a meeting, you had a meeting.
I have.
Okay, so, and I know we're buttoning up this with the sponsorship issue with the Airport Authority, correct?
Yes.
But that's also an issue because of the intergovernmental agreement. I mean, we're doing the intergovernmental agreement with the Airport Authority. The environmental assessment money's coming through us still, is that correct? Or is that going to change?
It will still come through the county's financial department because that's the way Georgia DOT is set up. And
Okay.
we prefer for it to remain that way. If we need to change it, we certainly can.
But the FAA wanted kind of recommended that we do this to take care of the airport authority side of it also.
I mean.
I'm just trying to understand, because I've asked a lot of questions since May, and I know we've kind of went back and forth on some things, and things have changed since May. And a lot of the questions that I've asked, the answers today are a little bit different. I'm not meaning any disrespect by anybody. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
If I can try to clarify that, and you know, one of the things, when the grant, I think as everybody on the board and as several members of staff in the audience are aware, the grant first came up, you know, it was several weeks ago, and it was tabled when it initially came up. When it came up, if you looked at the grant documents received from Georgia Department of Transportation, it defined the sponsor as both the county and the airport authority. And we had some questions in this meeting about that very fact, which we all answered on the same page, that it is both entities. It's, you know, the county's position that, hey, the grants were approved, the grant documents were approved, that indicated it's both entities. We did what the Georgia Department of Transportation asked of us, therefore, both entities are the sponsors. It's simply been, since that last meeting of this board, since the IGA was passed, that there's been communications with FAA and with the Georgia Department of Transportation. And the consensus was there'd like to be passed this resolution formally making that request in order to basically do some housekeeping on this. I think one of the things that's important to remember is that we've got 3 levels of government here that are involved, local, state, and federal, as part of this project. It does make things challenging at times, but I will also add that as one of the components of the intergovernmental agreement is that this body and the airport authority are going to follow both federal, state, and local laws and regulations to ensure that the process is done legally correct. And as we go forward, there will be times, I anticipate, changes or corrections will need to be made in order to ensure that we are compliant.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. There's no executive session. We did have Tommy Morris asking to speak, and he canceled that today.
Before we do that, I'd like to just make a motion that we discuss just for a couple minutes the intergovernmental agreement that we passed 2 weeks ago, due to the fact of I have been told but not seen that there was a letter sent from the city of Atlanta to maybe the airport authority concerning something with that intergovernmental agreement. And I know that we can't go into closed session to discuss litigation on that because it's the airport authority. So I'm making a motion for us to take just a couple minutes to discuss that. I would like to know something about the letter that was sent from the city of Atlanta to the airport authority. I have asked and not gotten an answer yet. If that would be okay, I'll make that motion.
So there's a motion to add something for consideration in the work agenda, work session agenda. If there's a second on that motion, then to add that, and then there is a vote in favor of adding that to the work session agenda, and that can be added as a topic to discuss during the work session agenda.
Or the chairman could just add it.
Or the chairman could add it.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, just so we talk about it.
Thank you.
Second.
There will need to be a vote to add it.
All in favor say aye.
Is there in fact a letter?
That's what I'd like to, that's what I kind of want to find out.
Isn't that a yes or no? There's a letter. If there's no letter, why would we discuss it? I didn't know there was a letter.
Let's vote and see.
Call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Nay.
Nay.
3 nays. We will then move forward. There's no public participation. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned.